1. All right, what's up, party people? It's your host, Sunny Ray, for the Sunny Ray Show. Today I'm joined by an old and dear friend, Shidan. Shidan, how's it going, buddy?
Great, man. Great.
Yeah, we were just reminiscing, right? How many years ago has it been that since was it in Bitcoin Central Decentral that we met? I want to say yes. Like Anthony's
Well, we met. Yeah, we. I saw you at Bitcoin Decentral often, but it was Kyle who really introduced us. He was working on one of my companies for a bit, and he introduced us when you started really doing Unocoin, and
So
yeah,
yeah, so I know we were you were asking about like doing a quick catch up. So maybe I'll keep my part of it kind of small and short because a lot of the listeners probably know about me, but we just celebrated our 12-year anniversary at Unocoin last month. So Unocoin is still chugging along.
congratulations.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know if you knew about this, but in 2018, essentially the central bank came after the crypto industry in India, and so we ended up taking them to court over it, the central bank that is, and we won that court case in 2020. We had Tim Draper, come in and lead our Series A. And yeah, and like I said, we just had our 12-year anniversary. We're India's first Bitcoin exchange, and in many ways, India's last as well. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's absolutely massive what you guys built there. It's absolutely amazing, and you built it in the country that's more primed for Bitcoin than probably any other country out there. I think even now, 18% of the Bitcoin is held in India, right? Am I right about that, or yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean, you're reading probably all the same stats I am, but I couldn't be more bullish on the country and its,
yeah,
relationship to Bitcoin. So yeah, so thank you for saying that, Shidan. Anyway,
yeah.
let's maybe turn the spotlight over back to you. And I know you've got an illustrious career. You're an investor, you're an entrepreneur, you've done a lot of things. So, I like to split my show up into kind of three parts. One is the kind of your backstory, right, before you got into Bitcoin and crypto. And maybe we talk a little bit about your Bitcoin experience and then maybe Bluesphere Ventures and what you're excited about there. But you want to kick us off and maybe share a little bit about, what your backstory is?
Yeah, sure. I started as a software developer myself out of college. That's what I was doing. Worked at IBM for 6 years doing that, and got into VoIP because we're working on a project where we were integrating with a phone system, and I learned how to change the caller ID. So I started crank calling all my friends. When I went home one day from work, and when I slept that night, I literally had a dream that I could be a phone company now. And the next day when I woke up, that kind of led me down that road, and I started the first CLEC, like the first VoIP company in Canada. Sold that to a major carrier. Then you know, after that, I was able to raise some funds from all the Canadian VCs. Brightspark Ventures led that round, and we started a company called Jazinga, which built the first small office VoIP phone system out there, like unified communications. And Skype ended up being our major customer for that. They were reselling it to all their customers, and after they got bought out by Microsoft, um, you know, they wouldn't work with us anymore because Microsoft had competing technologies. And I left the company then, and I was very excited with what was happening with iPhones and Android, and Android had just come out, and we actually, I started a company where we grabbed Android and ported it to TV sets. That essentially became the reference design for the consumer electronics industry, and that's that as far as my history goes there. So how I got into crypto is, early on when I'd started Jazinga, we stuff like Second Life was starting, and there was a lot of these virtual currencies that were starting, and I was extremely excited by them. I was like, you know what, there's this space is definitely going to grow, and I always thought it was the video game industry that would make it grow, and there's going to be a whole opportunity for a new financial system because of virtual assets, because of digital assets, and I was very, very excited about it. That same year, maybe a couple of years after that, one of the VCs that had invested in us came to me and said, "Look, I'm evaluating investing in this email spam company. Can you take a look at it?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I read their deck and their white paper, and I was like, this is kind of stupid. They want to use this thing called proof of work to make a way to prevent spam, and it was a group out of Montreal. I was like, but you know what? They're onto something. If you put a value to an email, you would prevent spam, right? And I was like, only if there's only micropayments, this would be an awesome solution. So that was the first time I heard of proof of work. And when it also started that company, one of the forums that a lot of people in the VoIP industry who were interested in decentralized communications was the P2P Foundation. And around 2009, I saw a paper about digital currency. I read it. I was like, oh, it's using that technology those Canadian guys that I spoke to had developed. This thing, who knows? It seemed to have mixed reactions. I was like, I didn't really get it. I still thought it was dumb, and didn't really think much about it other than relating it to those guys in Montreal who ended up becoming Blockstream. And you know, kept it on my radar though, and followed with news on it. 2011, it finally hit me. I kind of realized, I wasn't an expert with database systems, and I didn't even know what Byzantine fault tolerance was or anything like that back then. But 2011, I it you know I had my aha moment where I kind of realized that this technology is a lot more than just ecash or proof of work. This is really about decentralized databases. And that's when I learned all about the consensus algorithms. And I was like, this is an extremely exciting area. And really, for me, it wasn't Bitcoin as much as Namecoin. And after Namecoin, it was Bitmessage that I got really interested in, and I ended up supporting a couple of the core maintainers for that project. And the rest is history. Since then, my big passion has been this space really more than anything.
I like that. I like that a lot, Shidan. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned VoIP, right? Some people call Bitcoin MoIP, money over internet protocol.
I
Just
I actually
curious, like,
coined that.
you coined that?
I coined that,
Really?
and it was Alex Mashinsky of all people who kept going with it after.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay. But that is cool. I like that. It captures kind of this meta, at least for tech guys like me who grew up in
yeah,
that VoIP era. It makes it just very tangible, yeah. But just curious, between kind of like your, VoIP days and then getting into Bitcoin, were you seeing certain threads, certain like signals that made you eventually be like, yeah, there's something really, really big here? I mean, I
yeah,
loved your reference to like Blockstream and Dr. Adam Back and all these guys that, kind of lay the foundation for what Bitcoin is today. But just curious, like how that experience, it's so unique, right? And given that you were tinkering with like these internet protocols,
yeah.
yeah, just curious what kind of like patterns you saw there and
Yeah.
how you
I
might
mean,
have
I mean, for
accelerated.
you, for you, I mean, you came from the financial world. I think you were a broker before that. You had your own firm, and for me, it was opposite. For me, the exciting thing wasn't the gold narrative, like digital gold. It was the database, decentralized database narrative. And when I realized that, as I said, when I realized how powerful these things could be, it's not just a consensus algorithm for databases and Google's distributed systems, but it's something where people can be fully trustless and coordinate and do things together. And that just became hugely exciting to me. That compounded with the fact that I was actually excited about digital currencies and gaming currencies and whatnot. And I just putting the two together, I was like, yeah, this is the most exciting thing that's happened in technology in my career, right? For sure.
And Shidan, like you know, when you and I first met, I think it was at the like the decentral house, right? It was like this
Yeah.
broken down old a house that Anthony had taken over, and we were all like getting together. Um, you know, really just kind of like a really small group of people excited about this tech that most likely probably would have failed or should have failed. But how do you feel today that, you know, now that we fast forward into the future, here we are. You've got some of the biggest pubcos in the world aping into Bitcoin. You've got nation states, not to mention the United States, leading the charge and potentially holding Bitcoin as the national reserve currency. You've got the Black Rocks and the Fidelity. But like, did you expect this to be where we would end up in such a short period of time, or are we still kind of like behind the curve right now, would you say?
I think for me it's been bittersweet. Like the immense value it's brought to a lot of people, and I would have never thought that I'd have an asset that would get into a few for like $3 and would end up where it is today, right? But as far as the promises of digital cash, I think it still hasn't realized that yet. I'm still very bullish on where this space can go, but I still don't think it's delivered on its promises. If anything, I think it's worked the other way. I think all this institutional interest in it is a big turnoff for me. I think a lot of the problems with Bitcoin are more evident now, and the other cryptocurrencies I won't even mention because they're mostly nonsense to me as far as their narratives go. But Bitcoin, the fact that each side at the end of the day is non-fungible is, I think, a big problem. I think it's a big problem that it's being concentrated so much into Wall Street and institutional players. It's just not delivering on what it was created for as much as it should be. Um, I think there's still a big opportunity for it. I still think it's one of the only assets that can deliver on that, but I think a lot needs to be done for it to get there. So it's it's not as rosy as typical Bitcoin maxis, but it's for sure something that I haven't given up on, and believe for the long run that something great can come out of it.
Have you been following Lightning closely as well? And do you
I have.
believe that Lightning holds, you know, I guess from a privacy perspective and some of these other angles you touched on, do you feel that they might be able to address some of these challenges, or do you think again it's a bit more hype than anything else?
No, I think I don't have a problem with other blockchains. I think they're great. I I think decentralization comes from having a lot of blockchains, a lot of transactions between them, a lot of transactions inside the blockchain, DeFi, all of this stuff. I really believe in. I think it comes from the density more than any one asset goes. And I think for me, I think the Lightning Network, these new client side protocols that are off chain, like RGB and Taproot assets, are very exciting. Um, even the stuff like runes, I mean, it was an attempt, but it was a faulty attempt. And I actually tried to kickstart a project with some others around the whole RGB and space, but it's where Lightning was really uh 2016. Everybody said it was going to be tomorrow, and it turned out to be not tomorrow. It's maybe we're a few years off now, right? I think Lightning has some deficiencies, but it's one option. I think it's great for institutions. So I think for an Unocoin and a Kraken, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it brings decentralization to individuals. I don't think that's even important as long as you have somebody who's managing the liquidity for you, and there's players there. There's a big risk of centralization around that though. uh, it's not so much other people running nodes as other people as having to use these hubs for liquidity that I think a lot of the problems can arise, right? So I think what's happening with crypto now is very exciting with this intense based space, right? And Sorry, just blanked out here on my screen. But yes, and I'm actually starting a new venture that kind of is growing out of the failures of the one that I mentioned that was centered around runes and RGB and some of these technologies that's really looking at being a player in the intent space on BTC Fi and of all chains, XRP. And that might sound ridiculous because I mean we all would have looked at, I'm sure you too, as XRP being a big scam. But at the end of the day, and to some extent it is as far as being centralized and whatnot, and as far as issuance. But if you look at all the layers of decentralization, it's right now still the most decentralized DEX in the world. It's getting smart contracts, which are going to be very, very powerful. And having an interplay between things like an XRP ledger, for example, and a Spark ledger, and you know, off-chain smart contracts, and all of this will mean that being a broker or a solver or whatever you want to call it in the intense world is going to be an extremely special space to be in that can really grow. And that's an area of crypto that I'm very excited with. I've been mostly out of crypto since 2020, but this is a project that I am actually kickstarting that I am very excited about. And this idea of being this smart broker that has a protocol as a customer instead of you know, finding customers, is a big deal in my opinion, where you turn it into a marketplace. And so this company will have an open source component to it as well. We're also building a open protocol that's going to be a layer zero bridge between various Bitcoin networks and the XRPL ledger, Cosmos, and some others. But it's going to be centered around the actual company's business is going to be centered around being a broker on these networks. And when you have liquidity pools here or there and everywhere, and there's all these paths, finding the right path through them is going to be extremely lucrative. And you have this marketplace now, which is where things are moving, that will you don't have to again find a customer. It's just there for you. It becomes a massive arbitrage opportunity, right? So that's one business in the crypto space I'm excited about.
Interesting. Cool. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So tell me about
Okay.
Bluesphere. What is it? So it sounds like you guys are like an impact investor, right?
We started
Before,
off as that. We
yeah.
actually acquired the largest carbon credit broker in Canada. The whole space was I after I got into it, I realized I hated it, and we sold those assets off at a good profit. But now what we do is purely in the energy industry. So there's two things we do. One is we deploy after solar comes virtual power plants. And virtual power plants is about grabbing these batteries, throwing them in parking lots, strip malls, whatever. You buy when it's expensive, cheap. You buy when it's cheap, and you sell when it's expensive back to the grid. Again, like the intent brokers, the intent solvers, you don't need to find customers here. Your customer is a utility, you sell right to them. The other is right here in the Pacific Northwest. It's very, very cheap to generate electricity, and selling it to the West Coast of the US is an extremely profitable thing to do. It's actually more profitable than anything in crypto. That's something we're doing as well. So between the two, we're really mostly focused on the virtual power plant opportunity in New York, and we're working on 200 megawatts of deployment right now. And there's the opportunity of power generation also, as far as the arbitrage between Canada and the US. That's exciting about that. So that's my focus. That's really what I get up and think about every day is that space. And at the end of the day, energy is really the base currency of the world, and it will remain so. And
And
the world
nowadays,
runs around it.
with the recent storm of AI that's hit us, energy seems to become like a topic of conversation almost every day. It feels like you're talking to someone about
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah,
I
I mean,
just, yeah, go ahead.
we've moved from the age of computers being about I/O to computers being about heavy compute, right? That's something that I was saying a lot when we were running, Bitcoin mining companies. And I was like, you know, this is where the world's going to go. You're going to have the metaverse. You're going to have, you know, people immersed in, you know, teleconferences and all this kind of stuff. And it's all going to be about compute, and compute's going to become a very expensive thing. That's something I absolutely believed in, and anybody who comes from the Bitcoin mining world knows that. And I always saw the opportunity as moving from Bitcoin mining to being one component of a much bigger whole, which would be all of this, right? Compute in general. And yeah, that's a big driver for the future, right? As far as energy demand goes. But even without that, everything is becoming electrified. I think at the end of the day, you know, cars, regardless of the current administration in the U.S., will be a major factor. Homes, everything's going to be electrified, and it is for the better of the world. It really is.
I've been driving a Tesla for the last 5 years. So I definitely drank the Kool-Aid on that one. Cool.
Yeah.
So Shidan, where do people learn more about Bluesphere? Where do they learn about yourself? How can they, kind of track your
Yeah.
story and double click on all of it?
So Bluesphere, you can just go to bluesphereventures.com. But this new crypto project that we're kickstarting, I'm not going to release the name yet, but I'd definitely love to let you know about it when we do launch it. And I think it's going to be a well-received product and platform. And I'm really excited about that. That's my new venture back into crypto, really. Um, and BTC Fi is something that really excites me. I think Bitcoin's going to have a great future. I'm glad the markets are crashing because it gives you an opportunity to build, and the next wave is what I'm really excited about.
Well, Shidan, always a pleasure. It's been far too long since our last chat. Let's not
Yeah.
let that much time pass by. But any closing words? Anything you want to share to, I don't know, maybe if your younger self was listening from 8 years ago, any words of advice you want to leave people with?
Well, my younger self would be, don't leverage yourself and don't be a degenerate, because you know it would have been a lot more profitable as far as
Wise
everything
words.
went. Yeah.
All right, my friend, I'll bring this one to an end. Just hang out for a couple of seconds.